At this time, Katie was in the office in her study, but the Immigration Bureau has not yet found the will. Katie said, "I heard that it is kept in the main office of the city's main bank." Katie continued to speak. Mike was sitting on the ground next to the body of the missing man. He was very upset. "It's there. So then we can't get it if it's there," Mike said on the phone. "It's best not to think about a will just yet. Instead, we should check the president's house," said Mike. "Got it. Then I'll contact the Bureau and submit a request for a visit." Mike answered the phone with Katie. Mike sat and thought about what to do next. All his plans collapsed. "We should try to retreat if it becomes difficult to prove that he is an alien." Mike thought. The boss elves teleported Mike back to the city. He appeared on the roadway near houses and a police station. It was already early morning. The sun has almost completely risen. Mike met Police Inspector Johnny. "Where have you been, Mike? Do you look very bad? What happened to you? Where were you and what did you do there? Answer me," Police Inspector Johnny asked Mike. Mike really looked tired. The hair was disheveled. The clothes were slightly wrinkled and dirty. "What's Inspector Johnny?" Mike asked. "Don't worry. I look fine," Mike answered. An officer in a brown suit approached Inspector Johnny and Mike. He clapped his hands with joy. "And I sat and thought about how I could pull this off, since both of you have requested a visit, and I received such a wonderful bonus. It turns out that you have known each other for a long time." "This is wonderful," the employee said. "Do this yourself, and I'll just leave. Only then give me the keys back." Police Inspector Johnny and Mike went to the house. They opened the door and left. "Let me get this straight," Mike said. "There's not even anything to clarify here." Inspector Johnny answered. "I know that they will just give me to help you, and that's all. I should have guessed this right away." Police Inspector Johnny spoke. "Since he is such a bastard, the leader of the 2nd Brigade handed this matter over to me," the inspector said indignantly. "It turns out that the 2nd Brigade was doing this at first," Michael asked the inspector. Police Inspector Johnny began to talk. "Shall I tell you something? We recently had a big spike in missing elves. Photos of all the missing elves hung in our area. Therefore, the 2nd team was sent to the Special Investigations headquarters." The police inspector continued to talk. "And the case of missing person was left to loners like us. The police chief didn't care. He shouted that orcs were disappearing every day. This is the norm." The inspector and Mike were walking up the stairs. Mike, as always, kept his hands in his pockets. This was his favorite position. Police Inspector Johnny continued to talk. "The leader of the 2nd Brigade most likely found out that all the honors for this case will go to the Bureau and decided to throw this case at us," Inspector Johnny said. "To be honest, I'm very glad, Johnny, that you were assigned to me," said Mike. Mike was actually very pleased with this appointment. His eyes shone with happiness. There was a smile on his face. It was the face of a satisfied man. "Better to work with you, Johnny, than with those empty-headed cops," said Mike. They approached a large house with balconies. It was very quiet on the street and in the yard. "Trust me, I really appreciate your words, Mike. They are worth a lot. I know that you rarely praise anyone. And here are so many compliments, my honor." "I appreciate your words," Inspector Johnny said. It was quiet outside. Suddenly, very unexpectedly, and very loudly, the phone in Inspector Johnny's pocket began to play. This broke all the silence. This phone ringtone could ruin all plans. Police Inspector Johnny quickly took the phone from his pocket and pressed a button. The chief of police called him. "Johnny, there must be someone from the Bureau there. They told you to cooperate," the boss said. The police and Johnny hung up. Police Inspector Johnny was too angry with the chief and upset. "Don't worry so much, Johnny," said Mike. "Let's split the reward after this investigation is completed. It just seems to me that there will simply be nothing to divide there." "I know that, Mike, so just buy me a drink and that's it," Johnny said. "Wonderful. I like your thought process. Then, Johnny, let's go and earn money for this drink together. Will you support me in this proposal?" "Smiling?" Mike asked. Police Inspector Johnny and Mike went into the house. It was a very large house with many rooms. They began to search the house. We started our business from the living room. Mike began to search the shelf, which was located under the large TV. "How?" Then Mike went to the window. He began to look at the blinds and the windowsill. He checked everything, carefully. He was looking for any clue that could lead to the end of the investigation. So far, nothing interesting has caught my eye. Then they went into the next room. It was much smaller than the previous hotel. It wasn't so light here. Our heroes realized that this was most likely a library. There were shelves with books around, sofas and armchairs, so that these books can be read comfortably. Inspector! Police! Inspector. Johnny noticed a computer standing on the table. He sat down at this desktop and turned it on. The computer booted, and I opened a lot of interesting files. The police inspector sat and looked through everything that was on this computer. So far, he hasn't found any clue either. While Inspector Johnny sat at the computer. At this moment, Mike was checking the next room. In this room, there was a large bookcase that covered the entire wall. He began checking every shelf, every book, and on the very top shelf, he felt something with his hand. Mike. Did you find something? Johnny asked. No. I thought it was a box, but it's just an interesting book, answered Mike. I got you, Johnny said. I got on the computer and downloaded something. Tomorrow I'll send you the hard drive, everything I dig up there. Agreed, Mike said. See, we've already worked with you, Johnny. We are practically a team. We are partners. Mike smiled. Okay. I'll leave this matter to you. Take care of the hard drive and everything that was on this computer. I trust you completely, said Mike. Suddenly, Police Inspector Johnny heard a sound, an incomprehensible sound. At first it resembled a grinding sound, then like the sound of wind, then a howl. It was impossible to make out. What it is, I can't make it out. This reminds me of something, but I can't remember what, the police inspector said. The police inspector and Mike stood and looked at each other. Suddenly Johnny screamed loudly. I remembered. Does this sound like a sword crying? Don't you think so, Mike? Asked the police inspector. I know that ego swords make similar sounds. The inspector continued to speak as a police inspector. Hush, be quiet for a second, let me listen. Told Inspector Johnny to shut up, Mike. Mike stood and listened carefully to what was happening around. He wanted to catch this sound, to understand what it was. Do you understand where it is published from? Who is it published by? He was completely focused on that sound. But this could be evidence, Mike said to the inspector. Police Inspector Johnny and Mike walked down the corridor and began to peek into yet another room. They did it very carefully, like spies, so that they cannot be seen or heard. They peeked around the corner and watched what was happening in this room. But then Police Inspector Johnny and Mike boldly entered the room, realizing that there was no one there. They began to look around. There was a little excitement. What is this, really? Inspector Johnny asked. Police Inspector Johnny and Mike looked at the wall where the kitchen utensils were hanging. Among them was one frying pan. There was a slight vibration coming from the frying pan. It was the frying pan that made the sound. Without thinking for a long time, Police Inspector Johnny came up and took this frying pan in his hands. He carefully examined her from all sides. How is that? Why is the cry of the sword coming from this frying pan? I do not understand anything, the police inspector spoke. Suddenly, Police Inspector Johnny simply froze in place. He was like a kettle that was boiling. His eyes began to bulge out. Smoke came out of my ears, and then he just screamed very loudly in pain. This scared Mike very much. Police Inspector Johnny screamed very loudly in pain. This frying pan seems to have glued his hand to itself. The inspector felt as if he had grabbed a hot metal with his hand. It burned his hand and was very painful from the heat. He waved his hand with all his might and threw the frying pan on the floor. Mike stood there simply in shock. But he did not understand what was happening and how he could help the inspector. You scared me. What happened, Johnny? Mike asked. Is she talking or what? She can talk. Or what? I don't understand. Answer. Yes, she can talk. And not only that, answered Inspector Johnny. I understood you. Okay, she can talk. Well, why immediately throw it on the floor? This is a good thing, he said. Mike crouched down to pick up the frying pan from the floor. This creature, This frying pan makes very strange noises, Police Inspector Johnny said excitedly. At that moment, Mike took the frying pan with his hand. Literally a second later, Mike screamed in pain in an inhuman voice. He screamed in pain because this frying pan was talking to him in a nasty voice. Mike continued to scream and did not know how to get rid of her. "Oh, you're such a bastard, not a frying pan," screamed loudly Mike. He began to wave his hand with all his might, and he managed to throw the frying pan out of his hands. The frying pan flew and hit the floor. "I told you so," said Police Inspector Johnny. The frying pan was lying on the floor. Police Inspector Johnny and Mike moved a little further away from her. They didn't know what else this frying pan could do. They didn't know what else she was capable of. Johnny and Mike just stood there in silence and looked at a seemingly ordinary frying pan lying on the floor. Mike felt good to me. His body felt as if he was holding a red-hot piece of iron with one hand. On the one hand, it was painful, but on the other hand, it was scary, because this frying pan began to talk to you. Mike took a deep breath and exhaled almost warm steam from himself. Mike realized he needed to use magic. This had to be done, here and now. Something very light, just so that you can pick up this frying pan. And of course, I had to overcome my fear. After all, it's not every day you talk to a frying pan. Mike tuned into the desired wavelength and picked up this frying pan. Now it didn't hurt him at all to hold the frying pan in his hands. Now it turned out to be an ordinary frying pan, like millions of them. I looked at her for so long. "What are you?" I asked for a frying pan shirt. A smiley-like design appeared inside the frying pan. It was a smiling emoticon. It was a smile. "Thanks for asking. I am a great cook from the Eladam dimension. I have a partial copy of the memory you need. I am a cooking utensil with built-in intelligence." "You have already noticed that I'm not an ordinary frying pan," the frying pan said. Mike stood and held this frying pan tightly in his hand. This was his first experience of talking with a frying pan. From the outside, it looked very strange, but this is the reality of this world. He listened to everything the frying pan told him. She was partly right. Mike began to think, remember, and reflect. He remembered finding a body hanging in the forest. Even then, he realized that something was wrong here. At that moment, he could not understand what exactly. It turns out they worked quite well. Mike thought, remembering all the details. Mentally, he teleported back to the place where he found the body. He collected bit by bit all the data that he already had about what was happening. Mike stood and remembered. He began to remember everything that he had been told about the old woman named Daphne. Then he began to compare data regarding the will. Now the frying pan told him a lot more about everything. It was necessary to assemble all these grooves. "Homunculi," said Mike. "So that's it." Mike began to reason, because they used the same DNA as the chairman. But the results will then be positive if they decide to do a test. If the test is done, then the DNA will be positive. Mike continued to think. Mike stood there and couldn't understand just one thing. Why did they hang the fake on a tree in the forest a week after it went missing? I wonder why anyone would need this. Mike continued to think. If the death of a person is revealed, then the only benefit will be his heir, who will receive all these 300 billion, and the loser will be the country that cannot get these riches of an illegal alien. And even if the alien who hung this fake is for a company worth 300 billion, creating a homunculus is simply impossible. In Korea, you must be one of the 7 richest people, or have the technology to make it all happen. I thought to myself, Mike continued to reason. How much are the company's shares worth that they create this problem? Especially now that a homunculus is involved. The situation is completely out of control. At this rate, I'd better not get involved in this. Mike continued to talk. Yoskina chi. It was deep night, and it was very quiet. There were practically no stars in the sky. Only a few dark clouds floated across the sky. There was some fog on the tops of the mountains. It would be very nice if I could get at least some evidence from this house. Thought, Mike. Mike began to remember this house. I began to remember details and imagine the whole picture of what was happening in this house. Scovaroda continued to talk further. Ted seems like an ordinary person. I once saw him leave the house in the middle of the night. I also wondered what kind of meeting he went to so late at night. The frying pan said, I am cheerful on my wall on a hook and relaxing. The frying pan spoke. The next day I felt movement in the house. I clearly heard footsteps and rustling. These steps were heard in the living room. I calmed down because I thought nothing was happening. Mike was very surprised. What? He asked. Then perhaps he is an alien. Mike was completely lost in his thoughts. Listen to me, Inspector Johnny. Tell me, did anyone come into this house after the incident? Told you, Mike. No, no one entered the house. Today we came in for the first time since the chairman left this house, Police Inspector Johnny said. The frying pan suddenly spoke again. I'm telling you, I'm always at home. I see everything, I follow everything, and I remember everything. I'm a smart tech guy. I have a memory stick. I'm just sure it wasn't the chairman, the frying pan said. We always just come, search the house, and leave before dawn. He came for 5 days in a row, but then he simply disappeared. The frying pan continued to talk. Mike held the frying pan tightly in his hands. Tell me, have you seen his face? He asked the frying pan. I didn't see it. Unfortunately, I didn't see it. I don't have a night vision device. But judging by the silhouette, it was definitely a man, the frying pan said. The police inspector and Mike began to discuss everything they had heard. They began to compare all the facts. So what do we have? Let's talk, said Mike. To come and leave unnoticed, without using the door. This requires warp magic, Mike said. Mike, what did the frying pan tell you? Be careful, asked the police inspector. She told me a lot of interesting things. For example, listen. She told me that there was someone else here who had already searched the house before us. Can you imagine it? Said Mike. And, most likely, he entered and left the house using warp magic, said Mike. Mike began to use his magic, his superpower. His eyes lit up with a blue light. They became darker and lighter. Blue smoke began to emanate from it, which scattered throughout the house. I was just looking for traces of magic in the present, said Mike. But we had to look for them in the past. Mike continued. Police Inspector Johnny did not understand what was happening now. He was a little scared. He had never seen Mike use his dark magic up close and personal. Blue and blue smoke flew through the air throughout the house. Mike is my friend. What are you doing? The police inspector said in fear. Listen to me, Johnny. There is a spiritual world that intersects with the material. Help leaves traces in the spiritual world, said Mike. It's too difficult for me to understand, said the inspector. Now I just have to find traces of the use of warp magic. But then find out who broke into this house, said Mike. Mike walked around the house and compared all the facts that were already in his head. He walked around this room like a real detective. Blue smoke swirled around him. It worked his magic. Mike stood near the wall. So, he entered the house here, said Mike. Yes, he always appeared here. I remember that for sure. The frying pan in Mike's hands spoke. Mike held the frying pan tightly in his hand. He walked around the room of this house and looked at all the walls, ceilings, and everything that he could. Get his attention. There was blue smoke around him. The magic continued to work. Police Inspector Johnny walked quietly behind Mike. Find her, Mike told the frying pan. Mike walked to the corner of the room. All of his blue smoke dissipated into this corner. So, 10 traces of warp magic. Based on this, considering that he has only been here 5 times, then everything matches perfectly for us, said Mike. Suddenly, May screamed loudly. Johnny, partner, I think I've found traces of magic. Let's just try to track them down, said Mike. Micah directed his magic towards the wall. What does she keep telling you, this frying pan? The police inspector asked loudly. Mike squeezed the handle of the frying pan very tightly with his hand. He held it tightly so that it would not jump out of his hands. Come with us, Mike said to the frying pan. Otherwise it turns out that I am the only witness here, Mike said out loud. Mike put the frying pan in the trunk of the car. He closed the trunk well and securely. Do you want to tie me up and kidnap me, take me with you? A frying pan screamed loudly from the trunk of the car. Police Inspector Johnny got behind the wheel of the car. Mike sat next to him in the front seat. They started the car and drove off. "I suggest you not touch her unless absolutely necessary." "Do not touch this pan," said Mike Johnny. "I completely agree with you," answered the police inspector. "You and I are truly like partners." The police inspector and Mike were driving at very high speed. They drove like this for some time. They drove and were silent. They were a little shocked by everything that had just happened to them. "Please answer me. Why are all magicians capable of doing this?" asked the police inspector. "Actually, no. I did this simply from pure experience," Mike answered the inspector. They were driving a white police car. "This is understandable since your life is so long, even if you're only a quarter elf. I understand that you have been using this magic of yours for a long time. Your abilities simply amaze me," Johnny said. Police Inspector Johnny and Mike were driving and talking. "Answer me one question, partner," said Mike. "Are you really going to retire in 5 years?" Mike asked the inspector. "Certainly. Orcs age slowly, but then it happens very suddenly. The old ones quickly come to us," the police inspector said. "This is, of course, very cool and interesting," said Mike. "I don't know about the rest of the orcs, but you are my friend and partner. You are just doing great, just like a cucumber. You are simply amazing at what you do." Mike Police Inspector said, "I'm not kidding. I'm really telling the truth about you." Mike continued, "Listen to Johnny, and you don't want to work with us later as soon as you retire," Mike asked the police inspector. "Mike, you know our rules," Police Inspector Johnny answered. "What are the rules?" Mike asked. "You can't piss off a troll." "Not at all. Completely different," the inspector answered. "Then I need a book with all your rules," laughed Mike. "How do you think I should remember and know all this?" "I definitely need a book like this," Mike continued. The fact that everything Mike said made the orc very happy. Police Inspector Johnny was driving the car and smiling. For him, it was the first time it was so fun and easy with such a partner as Mike. "I'm walking with a partner. I'll tell you this, partner. There's only one rule. Just act according to the situation," she said. Inspector Johnny laughed. Their police car stopped at a crosswalk. The traffic light was red. People, orcs and elves, crossed the road. "Do this only if the occasion allows you. Forget the rest. Otherwise, my mother will throw a tantrum at you," Police Inspector Johnny said. Police Inspector Johnny and Mike continued to drive in the white police car. They continued to have a pleasant conversation with each other. They talked like real friends. "Isn't your mom still worried?" Mike asked. Their conversation continued. "Wait, remember when you detained a drunken orc officer who was beating a man? Wasn't your mom worried about you back then?" "I think I was even very worried." "Told you, Mike." Their police car stopped next to a small truck containing large concert speakers. It was heard from these speakers. Loud voice and calls. "The whole party is for the people, which is also created by people. The land has always belonged to us. It came from the speakers. People, give power back to the people. The main human party is candidate number 7, Choi Taek." Mike started listening to all this loud nonsense. He pressed the button to close his window so he wouldn't hear it. "The light has already turned green. Let's go faster. I don't want to listen to this nonsense. My ears are just drooping," said Mike. The traffic light turned green. Police Inspector Johnny pressed the pedal and they quickly drove off from the start. Our heroes rode and were silent. They were a little tired from their conversations. It's just that we've never had to communicate so much close to each other before. Mike began to look at the dashboard of the police car. "I suggest we listen to the radio. I hope you don't mind," Mike asked the police inspector. "Yes, come on, that's a good idea." "I'm already tired of driving in silence," Inspector Johnny said. Mike pressed the radio button. The radio turned on. The voice from the radio spoke. "And now we move on to the main news and the main events. A visit from the Galanko dimension. Princess Burmy of the United Royal Family was announced. The radio continued to talk. According to rumors, this visit is about preparation toward mass immigration. However, the United Nations currently denies this. The ghost is calling a protest in front of Congress today, Mike said, and this request is valid, and the bill concluded that it would violate their privacy, said Mike. Mike sat in the front seat and carefully examined the road ahead. He tried not to even blink so as not to miss anything important. Then, Mike began to use his dark magic again. Mike looked forward in the direction of their car. "Inspector Johnny, stop!" screamed loudly. "Mike!" Police Inspector Johnny abruptly stopped the police car. The squealing of brakes could be heard all along the street. Floated around the car, blue and blue smoke. It looked like fog. "Their tracks diverge here," said Mike. Police Inspector Johnny opened his driver's door. He got out of the car and looked carefully ahead. Inspector Johnny said in a confident voice, "I know this place very well, Mike. I know it very well." "Are you sure we've arrived at the right address?" the inspector asked. There were a lot of orcs on the streets of this area. They were everywhere. This was their area. There was a community of orcs here. Several adult orcs were sitting outside playing board games. Mike also got out of the police car. He looked around. "So, Johnny, let's talk together," said Mike. "If they came every night for 5 days, then, most likely, they settled here for a while." Mike continued to talk. "If you look around and think carefully, this area is ideal," said Mike. Therefore, blue and blue smoke was flying around the area. It looked like fog. It covered the entire area of the region. This was Mike's dark magic at work. It's very good that there are no traces of invisibility magic here. "So, let's check the CCTV cameras," Mike told Police Inspector Johnny. "Of the two of us here, only you are police officers," said Mike. "I think this is not the first time for you to do something like this. Therefore, I entrust this important matter to you, my dear friend Inspector Johnny." The police inspector combed his beard with his hand. It was clear that he was not ready for such a proposal. "Fine. Got it. I'll try," the police inspector said. The next day came. The weather has completely deteriorated. The sky was overcast with gray clouds. It seemed like it was going to rain soon. Police Inspector Johnny and Mike were walking down the street. We looked at everything around and were surprised. Why can't this be? Mike was surprised. Mike and the police inspector. We walked around almost all the streets, all the houses. Mike looked around very carefully. He looked at every house. Mike walked up to store windows and examined them. "I can't understand one thing, that there is not a single video surveillance in the entire area?" Mike asked in surprise. They went through almost the entire area. The police inspector turned to Mike. "Unfortunately, this is an orc area. It happens here. It's the norm here," Police Inspector Johnny said. At that moment, Mike understood everything. "So that's why you had that look on your face when I asked you to take video surveillance of the area," Mike said to the inspector. The police inspector and Mike continued to walk through the area. "Well, this is how it all happened. If everything is against us, then let's use the good old proven methods," said Mike. "Good old methods? What else are they?" I asked Mike the police inspector. "Yes, this can be said to be the traditional method," Mike answered him. Mike extended his hand forward. He held a bottle of water in his mouth. "Just think. It's better to poppy in the 21st century. Decks carry out research manually," said Mike. Police Inspector Johnny and Mike went to ORK Pub. It was a local small bar. There was a lot of good cheap booze, and there was always music playing. This place was very popular with the orcs. Police Inspector Johnny and Mike went inside the bar. There was practically no one there. Most often, the orcs gathered in the bar in the late afternoon. The bartender was so funny. Was he an orc too? "Haley, are you there?" the police inspector said. From the look of the bartender bell, it is clear that he is, firstly, surprised by the appearance of Inspector Johnny here, and secondly, he was unhappy that he saw the inspector in his bar. "I don't understand. What are you doing here, Johnny?" "Did you receive the report?" the bartender asked. Now Mike looked with surprised eyes at Police Inspector Johnny. He was slightly shocked. Do you know each other, Johnny? Mike asked in surprise. Yes, this is simply part of my powers as a police inspector, the inspector replied calmly. Police Inspector Johnny walked up to the bar. He took a photograph out of his pocket and placed it on the bar counter. Don't worry so much, I'll just ask you a bunch of questions, the police inspector said. Tell me, please, did you see anyone suspicious nearby? The police inspector sat down. Police Inspector Johnny moved the photo closer to the bartender. Look carefully. He has the same build as this one in the photo. The police inspector asked Jenya. The main thing is now. It works mostly at night and has a wizard scent, Johnny said. The bartender took a photo of his hand. He began to look carefully at the photograph. Of course I work at the bar. In just one working week, almost all the orcs pass through my bar. Well, if not all but most, said the drum. He thought about it. But I don't remember this. The bartender said, Okay, since you're inspect, it was Johnny who asked me for help. So be it. I'll think about it and watch it for you. The bartender turned around, opened the curtain of his bar, and began to leave. 1 minute, please. I'll make one call now, and I will return to you. Wait for me, please, the bartender said and left. After a while, the bartender returned. One of my friends said that he saw someone similar in the third quarter. So my friends, go there, the bartender said. The bartender gave it back. The bartender gave it back. To the photography inspector. To the photography inspector. Beacon really hoped that the bartender would know everything that was happening in the area. It will be much easier than I could have imagined, Mike thought. We don't have to look into every house and every apartment with this photo. We could have lost a lot of time this way. Police Inspector Johnny and Mike went with the photo to look for this man. They asked the first passerby where their third quarter was. Which way should they go? The police inspector and Mike walked on. On the street, they met several passers-by. The police inspector began asking questions. Show a photo? Ask questions. The orcs began to indicate and guarantee which direction it was better for them to go. Mike and the police inspector stopped. There is poor security in the orc area, and there is no video surveillance. So they don't even go out at night, the inspector said. If the criminal praised, he did it every night. It would obviously be very easy to notice. Inspector, inspector, inspector. It follows from this that the orcs sit at home at night. They don't go outside. Then they just look out the windows to see what is happening on the street. If he walked down the street alone, then everyone could see him, the police inspector said. Wait, please, Johnny, Mike said anxiously. Mike began to use his dark magic. His eyes became light blue again. A blue tube began to spread around the city. This blue fog flew into almost every house and every open window. Johnny, I think I've found it, Mike said loudly. Mike stopped in front of a tall building. All balconies faced the roadway. And so the dark magic worked very well. Blue fog began to seep along all the balconies. Then it began to accumulate into one large glowing lump on one of the balconies of this house. This is the guy who used warp magic, said Mike. The police inspector and Mike approached the door of this house. Mike's dark magic worked so well that the entire door was illuminated blue. It was also painted with some strange drawings. He used the barrier. He must have really wanted to live, the police inspector said. Looks like he doesn't have enough skills since he cast several at once, Mike answered. At this time, Mike was very serious. His eyes were still blue. Samaya emitted a blue mist that seeped through the doors. His magic worked well. Let's deal with them one by one, said Mike. Mike understood what needed to be done. Mike knew he needed to act immediately. It was impossible to wait. Any minute of delay could ruin their plan. Mike concentrated very hard. His eyes glowed blue. Something went wrong, and the door did not open. Police Inspector Jolie stood nearby. He watched with great interest everything that was happening around him. He had already begun to gradually get used to the magic that he had seen so often from Mike lately. And he's smart, Mike said. Mike was very determined. He understood that the police inspector did not know magic at all, and in this situation he was not his assistant at all. Therefore, He decided to take care of it. And Johnny sighed. "Step aside, please," Mike said. "This smart guy is trying to escape." Mike continued talking. In the city, the sun suddenly disappeared on the street. A red glow appeared in the sky. Large black and red clouds also began to appear in the sky. The streets became dark, and everything began to be illuminated with a dark red light. Suddenly, unexpectedly, a strong wind blew from the high floor of this house, right from the balcony. The stream of strong wind was colored black and red. The movement was so strong that it looked like a red tornado that came straight out of the balcony of the house. The flow of this red air became larger and larger. It was gaining speed and scale. This red cloud began to spread throughout the city. Mike was more focused than ever at that moment. He seemed to be in complete control of everything. There was a short pause. "Take him!" Mike shouted loudly. Mike channeled his dark energy and magic towards that red cloud. A white light flash began to occur inside the red cloud. It was as if something was exploding inside that wind. Police Inspector Johnny stood and watched everything that was happening. I've never seen anything like this before. In his entire long career, he sees this for the first time. Mike just stood there and watched. The red cloud has cleared. Everything turned blue and blue. The police inspector and Mike saw a young guy. It was clear from his body that he was in good physical shape. This guy in the wall opened the portal with his hands. A black, narrow hole appeared to escape. This guy turned to face the police inspector and Mike. His body had large muscles. He had already managed to stick one hand into this black hole, which looked like a portal, in order to escape. "What do you think you'll catch me?" this guy shouted. Mike looked at this young guy very seriously and angrily. It seemed like another moment and he would run away. "This." The police inspector shouted loudly, and he quickly ran to grab this guy. Police Inspector Johnny didn't understand what was happening. He had never seen anything like this. There were tongues of red and black fog around him. They enveloped him from all sides. His eyes became very large in surprise. He didn't understand what to do in this situation. Then, Police Inspector Johnny saw how red tongues of fog began to bind the leg of this young guy. They wrapped themselves around his leg like octopus tentacles and tied him down. He tried to escape, but he didn't succeed. The young man jumped high to take off. He stretched his arms up into the sky, but tongues of red and black smoke and fog hampered his movements. They swirled around his body. "What's happening?" the young man shouted in fright. It didn't take long before he was completely shackled and tied around his entire body with this black and red mist. Like ropes, they entwined his entire body from head to toe. He fell to the ground, completely bound. Police Inspector Johnny and Mike stood and looked at this young man who was lying completely tied up on the floor. "Oh, Police Inspector," my eyes almost fell out. He was shocked and very surprised. He's seen a lot in his life, but he's never seen anything like this before. "Mike, we got him, and he won't run anywhere else?" the police inspector asked in surprise. "I think so, Johnny," Mike answered. Police Inspector Johnny and Mike dragged this young man into the house. They went into his room and sat him on the bed. Was he sitting with his hands tied? The police inspector and Mike stood opposite him and looked at him. "What are you?" the police inspector asked the young man. "Why do you care who I am?" the fugitive answered very boldly. This young man had a tattoo on his left chest. It was a circle with beach symbols written inside it. "Are you a member of the community?" asked the police inspector. Mike looked at the criminal and began to remember. "This society, if I'm not mistaken, is a criminal organization that consists of very capable and daring prisoners," said Mike. "You are absolutely right. This is a gathering place for the scum of society," the police inspector said. The young fugitive continued to sit with his hands tied. The police inspector and Mike continued their interrogation. Johnny had a phone in his hands. He scanned it quickly. "What can I say? His phone is clean," Johnny said. "It's clear. And there's nothing in his room either. There's nothing special," said Mike. Police Inspector Johnny quickly grabbed the criminal by the throat with his hand. "Since we have confirmed that you are a criminal to members of a super powerful criminal organization, then, according to Article 4 provided for by the Constitution of the Republic of Korea. As a citizen. The inspector spoke, and his words were interrupted by the criminal. Go to hell, said the criminal. Police Inspector Johnny laughed loudly in the face of this young criminal. You weirdo? You're not even human, do you understand? The police inspector said. You're just a piece of shit who thinks he's human. Knowing this, Police Inspector Johnny said. The young criminal was sitting in his underpants. He looked at the police inspector with a very angry look. What do you think? If you put on the uniform, you become one of us, the criminal said. You have no idea how angry I am. I'm so angry I just want to tear you apart, said the young criminal. Mike looked at all this happening with a very calm gaze. He, as always, stood calmly and kept his hands in his pockets. I won't be able to help you if you say something like that again, said the criminal. Is Mike. You better believe his words. The police inspector confirmed this. The police inspector held the criminal tightly by the throat with one hand. In his other hand, he took a large hammer. He began to swing this hammer towards the head of the young criminal. His look was very serious and angry. This is already some kind of barbarism, Mike said to the inspector. Isn't that your style, Mike? Asked the police inspector. No, that's definitely not my style, Mike answered. Remove it immediately, he told the inspector. Believe me, I have something much better, said Mike. Even better. What is this knife? Asked the police inspector. No, of course not, Mike said. Come take a closer look. It will be just ordinary magic. Although for you it is, of course, unusual, said Mike. Mike held out his hand. We give the boy a big boil. Then it burst, and something incomprehensible appeared from the finger. It looked like a small worm that had wings and a beak. It was a very disgusting sight. The spectacle is not for the faint of heart. Mike began to extend his finger, on which this vile insect was sitting, directly to the young criminal's face. The young criminal did not understand what was happening. There was wild fear in his eyes. No, that's not what you won't do, the young criminal shouted. No damn bastard. I'll do it. Trust me, said Mike. Why are you scared? Where did your heroism go? Mike asked the criminal. It was given. I already see that you have guessed everything. Then maybe it's time to share with us everything you know, said Mike to the criminal. The young criminal continued to pretend to be a big hero. He was scared, but he tried not to show it. He was silent and did not say anything. Well, of course you are a complete idiot, said Mike to the criminal. Then Mike, with his magic, sent this insect straight into the criminal's nose. He inhaled it and screamed loudly in pain. Johnny, please give me the recorder. It seems to me that she became his time, said Mike. The police inspector put a voice recorder in his t-shirt hand. Here you go, partner, Johnny said. This insect was crawling all over the young criminal's head. It was unbearable, painful, and disgusting. The criminal made a face in pain. He screamed and screamed. White foam began to come out of his mouth. The young criminal began to say something very unintelligibly, to the best of his ability. Mike very quickly picked up the recorder, turned it on, and began recording. He needed to write down everything that this bastard could say inaudibly. He kept the record button on. Mike began to use his black magic. He made sounds unknown to anyone. These sounds were similar to microwaves. The young criminal began to tremble all over. His body was shaking very violently. Mike, what's going on? What is this? The police inspector asked very excitedly. He watched everything that was happening. He was scared again because he had never seen anything like this before either. Don't worry, Johnny. Everything is fine. It's just a lucky bug. Mike answered very calmly. The young criminal sat with his head thrown to the side. He was practically unconscious. I'll explain everything to you now, Mike said. This bug goes directly into the criminal's brain. Then it causes dopamine to explode, and it begins to cause a big surge of happiness in the body. Told you, Mike? Mike brought the recorder he was holding in his hand closer to him. He looked at the recorder screen. Just great. I wrote down the spell. so now I can use it for a while. Satisfied, Mike said. I understand almost everything, the police inspector told Mike. The young criminal began to scream loudly in pain. No, stop it. Stop mocking me. What are you doing to me? It hurts me. Stop, the young criminal screamed in a wild, terrible voice. The young criminal remained seated with his hands tied. He screamed loudly, Please let me go. Now I can't go back to this place. The criminal shouted, Let me go back. The young criminal continued to scream. Great, then I'll ask again, said Mike. Mike put his recorder right in front of the criminal's face. Do you want to go back to your happy memories? Mike asked. It's just a happiness bug control spell, said Mike to the young criminal. At that moment, the happiness beetle that Mike had planted in the criminal's head crawled into the very brain. He was sucked into it. He fed on the energy of a criminal. Just tell me everything you know and I'll let you go, Mike said confidently to the criminal. Mike stood and recorded on a tape recorder what the criminal was saying. I have no idea where Tajan is. I just had to find the secret vault with magic hidden in his house. The criminal continued talking, and bring all the contents to the customer. The young criminal spoke. Secret vault. Mike asked. I didn't see anything like it when I explored the whole house. Mike continued talking. The young criminal remained sitting with his hands tied in his underpants. Only dim light fell on his body. Police Inspector Mike listened carefully to everything the criminal was saying. I'll tell you, by the way, tell us who the customer is? Michael asked the criminal. The criminal listened as much as possible and continued talking. I don't know his name, but I know what he is. The criminal fell silent abruptly. Mike didn't understand what happened. Why did he suddenly stop talking? Then Police Inspector Johnny grabbed him by the neck and was about to punch him in the face. What is he what? Asked the police inspector loudly. This asshole is still lying to us right now. The police inspector was indignant. But it's true, I'm really on orders from the center, the young criminal shouted loudly. Police Inspector Johnny was simply shocked by what he heard. Mike, did you hear that? What do we do now? Asked the police inspector. Are you going to continue this? The inspector continued to ask. It's too dangerous, you know. Johnny spoke. Police Inspector Johnny continued to hold the criminal's throat with his hand. To be honest, he had a desire to just strangle him, and that's it. And it's done. Well, the police can't work like that. At this time, Mike came up with a very strong idea. He began to scratch his chin with his fingers. Things get much more complicated. Mike thought to himself, is there a dragon customer? Yes. If the customer is a dragon, then things are very bad. After all, dragons are creatures of the highest class. Mike, what are you talking about? Are you out of your mind? What other dragons? This bandit is sitting in front of us. Let's take mine to the police station and then let the center figure out what to do with him, Police Inspector Johnny said. Mike started talking. Dragons are creatures that can become superior creatures in just one generation. Believe me, they have not one or two people who disappeared because they were simply not pleased with something. These are powerful beings who now rule society. They are very, very rich. They have very enormous power and control everything like puppets, said Mike. The director, the police inspector, and the mech stood in the middle of the room. Mike, what are you worth? What are we going to do? Tell me, he asked the police inspector. Wait, Johnny, I still have questions, said Mike. Mike suggested that the police inspector take this young criminal to the police station. They took him outside and left. There were a lot of people around. There were also a lot of policemen. Near the police station, they saw the main one and approached him. If you don't want to listen to me, then at least listen to the tape recorder. Told you, Mike. Please follow the rules. Told you, Mike. But few people listened to him. Mike, are we going to leave this guy like this? Johnny asked about the criminal. He's enjoying himself. I don't care about him. Let him enjoy the happy bug, said Mike. Reporting everything to the police and bringing the criminal here was indeed the right decision. Two policemen took the young criminal by the arms. His hands were tied and additionally handcuffed. They put a towel over him to keep him warm, and so that he does not scare away passers-by on the street with his appearance. He had a bug inside him that made him happy. The police inspector asked Mike, They usually just die, right, Mike? No. If he receives decent treatment, then the chance of survival will be somewhere around 50%, Mike told the inspector. But it all depends on what effect the magic potion will have. Mike continued talking. The young criminal looked like a mentally ill person. A large number of wrinkles appeared on his forehead. The nose stretched out. The eyes became white. The eyes were large and protruded outward. It was a very scary sight. Mike and Police Inspector Johnny took the young criminal to the station. Then they got into their white police car and hit the road. Inspector Johnny, as always, was behind the wheel. Sitting in the car as they drove, Mike began tuning the radio. He wanted to listen to the news. The radio wave was very poorly received, and so Mike did it, and the radio said, "Let's move on to the next news." A decision was made for the visit of Princess Vernus. The radio didn't finish speaking because the wave got lost and there was interference. Then the radio continued talking. "And this is Korea." There was interference again, and nothing was heard. "I think there are only about 4 culprits." "Told you, Mike." "However, I still don't understand their motives. What the hell is this? Most dragons don't claim to be like that," said Mike. The radio started talking again in the car. "And this will be at least 15% of the market capitalization. This is a new big record for Hassan Industry." They continued driving in the car. Mike repeated the word he heard on the radio. Hassan. Then, Mike was suddenly surprised. "What? Hassan? Hassan Industry?" Mike was too surprised. "Mike, don't you think this is Tajin's boss's company?" the police inspector said. "This is a common occurrence for such big shots. Will they cope while the boss is away?" said Mike. "Or maybe he approved everything even before he disappeared," the inspector asked. The police inspector and Mike continued driving in their white police car. "Johnny, aren't you hungry? Maybe we can eat together," Mike said and handed the food into his hand. "What is this?" Johnny asked. "Ham and cheese sandwich," answered Mike. "Yes. I heard Katie did it to you." "Does she know how to cook?" Johnny said. "I'm not sure," answered Mike. They arrived at Mike's office. We went into his office. There was a talking frying pan on the table. There were a lot of different pieces of paper with notes lying around the frying pan. We're only basing this on what the guy told us. "Tajin's house to find the secret storage room, but I didn't find anything," said Mike. "Skovoroda is also silent about this." Mike continued talking. "Therefore, we returned to the office with you to discuss our further actions." "Told you, Mike." Max sat down on the sofa and thought. "And what is the result now?" said Mike. "It's clear it's time to give up." "Very upset, Mike. I'll lose before I even get anything," Mike said in a frustrated voice. Suddenly, the door to Mike's office suddenly opened. A disheveled Katie ran into the office. It was clear from her that she was late. "Mike, I'll visit the immigration office tomorrow. And most importantly, I came," Katie shouted proudly. Inspector Johnny and Mike smiled. "You burst into the office like a demon," Inspector Johnny said. "Uncle Johnny, what are you doing here?" Katie asked. "Uncle, why did you start calling me that?" Johnny asked, not understanding, and indignantly. "Have you seen your face?" Katie answered. "I'm actually an orc." The police inspector said quietly, "Why a frying pan? Do you want to cook something delicious? And then eat it without me," Katie said. Mike sat and looked at Katie with a calm gaze. "If you touch it, you will want to wash your hands urgently. That's the minimum," said Mike. Katie began to look at the documents that were lying on Mike's desk. She sorted and rearranged all the papers. Katie started asking, "Mike, what is this? What kind of document is this? What is this? Do you need this? Or can you throw it away?" Continued asking Katie questions. Unexpectedly, Katie, I took the frying pan lying on the table. She rose to the city above the table. A red, smiley face appeared inside the frying pan, eyes and smile. "Hello, I'm glad to meet you," the frying pan said. Katie was shocked. She brought the frying pan closer to her face to take a closer look. Did the frying pan tell me that? What is she saying? Can she speak? Is she talking? So it turns out that she is alive? Katie kept asking. You can call me stupid, the frying pan said. Hello, stupid, Katya said. Because I laughed. No, that's wrong. Wait. Don't you have another name? Katie asked. Is it okay to call you stupid? I think no, Katie said. Mike was sitting on the sofa. Katie, don't even think about taking her. Do you hear what I'm telling you? Do not even think, said Mike. I wonder why, Katie asked. Is this the big problem? She asked, rolling again. No, there are no problems, answered Mike. Katie walked closer to the table where Mike was sitting. She was holding her handbag on her shoulder. Katie looked at Mike with a friendly look. It seems to me that something is definitely going to happen soon. Katie said, I'm really glad I took this with me today. Katie continued, It's just no wonder I was so eager to have a drink today. Katie said cheerfully, Boys, why are you sitting so sad? Maybe you girls will answer? Katie asked. Sorry, I'm not in the mood today, said Mike. I can't do it today either. I've been driving all day, the police inspector answered. At that moment, Katie suddenly took out a large red bottle of good, expensive alcohol from her purse. She was proud and enthusiastically raised it forward at arm's length, and if so, 37 years old, seasoned. Kingsley Aston. This is the best collection of Gnome Maestro. Yes, Katie said proudly. Yes. Katie. The boys quickly ran for food. I needed something to snack on. They also got hold of dishes and glasses. A luxurious table was quickly set. There were light snacks on the table. Chips. Fresh vegetables finely chopped on a plate. There were also several types of good cheese. They took some more bottles of wine and placed them with ice buckets. Mike was sitting on his favorite couch. He held a glass of red wine in his hand and leaned back well on the sofa. It was a wonderful break for today. This spontaneous party in Mike's office lasted several hours. Very soon, it was deep night. It was very dark outside. Mike's office building was illuminated only by the bright white moon. Judging by what happened on Mike's desk after the party, conclusions could be drawn. Every last drop of alcohol was drunk. The ice in the buckets melted, and there was just water. Empty bottles lay on the table. Several pieces of different food lay on different plates. Empty packets of eaten chips were also lying on the table. The table was a terrible mess. At this time at night, next to this table, on which there had recently been a party, stood Mike's favorite sofa. He was lying on his side and sleeping very soundly. There was a very terrible and foul smell in Mike's office. Mike really wanted to go get a drink of water, but he simply didn't have the strength. I feel like just a corpse. Told myself, Mike, maybe I was just poisoned? Mike lay there and thought, no, I don't think so. It's just a slight hangover. Mike reasoned, oh God, the hangover, and why did I drink? Crown Prince Graham forced me. Wait, no, that was 250 years ago. Mike continued to lie and talk. Are you really going to do this alone? Because you are a necromancer who's under a spell. No, it was a long time ago when I was very weak and just starting to work. Mike continued to talk to himself. Yes, but now I'm here, said Mike, and he extended his hand forward. I'm on the ground, said Mike. Mike opened his eyes and was indeed lying on the ground right on the road near his office. He looked very shabby. And, my name is Mike, said Mike. Mike continued to lie on his back. He hardly opened his eyes and looked at the sky. He felt very bad. He was generally weak, and his whole body ached. Suddenly, a baby orc appeared in front of him. The kid leaned over Mike. Was he alive or not? Making sure Mike was alive and breathing, the kid said, Hello, I brought you a cold soda. Drink, and you will immediately feel better. And get up faster. You can't just lie here and be seen like this, the baby said. Mike drank the cold soda my baby brought. He felt better. He went up to his office, opened the window, and looked out into the street. The weather was wonderful. He just wanted to get some fresh air. Mike had a piece of paper in his hands. It was a letter demanding that he urgently appear at headquarters. Something must be going on, Mike said. We arrived by car. He got out of it and headed towards the headquarters building. Several people met him. Mike asked the driver to wait for him. One of the guards who met Mike said, "It's you, Mike. Then follow me." The guards led Mike towards the headquarters. It was a very large glass building. It looked like a skyscraper. There was something written on top. The guard always walked next to Mike. Mike walked down the corridor towards the doors that were held open by two girls. Something is clearly going on here, Mike thought. Most likely, this is because of what we discovered yesterday with Police Inspector Johnny. Thinking again, Mike. The girls standing near the door invited Mike to go inside. "Thank you," Mike said. At that moment, Mike heard a woman's voice. "Come in." Mike realized this was the CEO's office. At the end of the office, Mike saw a beautiful girl. True, it was not a girl but an elf. She sat elegantly on the windowsill. "I've already been waiting for you, Agent Mike," Elf said. Her name was Blair. She is the chief secretary of the Jenkins Corporation. Jenkinson is also a dragon.